everyone. I'm Elizabeth, and this is Mary, and we are Canadian immigration lawyers at LM Law Group. It's so great to see so many of you here today. We have a very interesting and special program that is just been released. It hasn't started yet, but the details are just being slowly released to us. And for a lot of you who are in this field, who are looking to get permanent residence, or who are hiring caregivers, I think it's going to be very important. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start by just presenting a few slides on the details of the program. And then at the end, we're going to have a question and answer period. So if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A slot on the bottom of your screen, okay? And we're going to try to get through as many questions as we can at the end. All right, let's get started.
Okay, so IRCC has announced that there are going to be two different streams under this program. The first one is the Workers in Canada program, and then the other one is for applicants who are not working in Canada. So they've said that when the program opens on March 31st, it's going to be for the Workers in Canada stream. So they'll only be accepting applications from those workers at this time. They've also told us with some clarity that it's a direct to permanent residence application. So whereas in older programs, we saw that there was a work permit stage first, this program is going to be directly applying for PR when you submit your application. The website also says that the Workers in Canada program is for workers who are currently working in Canada on a full-time basis in a non-seasonal position. So it's not altogether clear exactly what that means. We don't know how that will apply for people who are in between jobs, for students, for people who may not have a work permit right now. But we do know that for people who do have a valid work permit and are working legally, they will be able to use this program. And for those people who are out of status or may be without a work permit at the moment, the announcement indicated that there may be a public policy that comes out in the coming, well, we don't know exactly when, but there may be a public policy that will give options for caregivers who do not have status in Canada right now. They have indicated that if they do that public policy, there will be a limited number of spaces available. And that's something that will be very important to keep an eye on in the coming months. Hopefully we get some clarity on that program soon.
I noticed a lot of people are just jumping into this call in the last few minutes. Just to let you guys know, we are recording this and it will be posted on our website as well. And everyone who registers will be able to get a copy of the slides, get a copy of the recording as well. And also, if you're not already on the newsletter, most of you probably are on the newsletter. If you're not already on there, we're going to just add you onto the newsletter. Just so that when we have important updates to laws like this, that you'll be receiving those updates as well. Also, for those who are coming in, if you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. We will be trying to answer as many questions as we can. I already see a lot of the questions already coming in. Just one of the things about the questions, please try to keep them general questions, not, oh, this happened to me and da da da, because this is not a place where we can address your personal situation. It's not private, and we do need some time to go over that with you as well. But if you have some general questions, I'm sure if you have some questions, other people will also have similar questions as well. All right, so moving on to what you need to do to qualify. Well, first of all, the government just recently has said that you're going to either need relevant and recent work experience or 6 months of caregiver training. Okay, so what is relevant and recent work experience? The government has not defined this yet. How recent is recent? How relevant is relevant? Um, but, and how much of the work experience is it? Does volunteer work experience count? Right now, the government hasn't defined this. They may define this later on down the road when we come closer to the application date, or it could be a matter of interpretation. It could be something where we would argue this. So, that remains to be seen. Uh, Other than that, if you have the 6 months of the caregiver training, that's certainly, something that instead of the work experience, you have that training, you can use that as well. And they will now only require the high school diploma. Before you had to get your at least a post-secondary program. Now high school is enough, but on all of this, if your education was not in Canada, you will need to submit your education credential assessment as well. And then the language requirements have dropped as well. Now you only need to have a CLB in 4, which is much better than before as well. But you do need that CLB in 4 in every single skill level: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Okay, not just the overall score.
Mhm. And just to add to the work experience requirement, they have indicated that it is 6 months of work experience that will be necessary.
Yeah.
And so that's at least a nice guideline that we have in terms of how much we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, another key requirement is the job offer in Canada. So the job offer that you need to have needs to meet specific requirements in order to qualify for the program. It needs to be a full-time job offer where you're going to be doing home care for children, elderly, or disabled persons. And the home care aspect of that is really important. So this program is not for people who are personal support workers who are working in a hospital or who are working in an institution. It's for people who are working in a home environment, in a residential setting. Now, the new program has opened up some restrictions that were there on the previous programs, where the person who's offering you the job there are more options there. So right now, the rules are for this new program that you can get the job offer from a private individual or a household, or you can also get it from an organization that hires full-time workers to provide home care. However, please note that that does not include recruitment or placement agencies. So that's more for people who might be getting a full-time job offer from, say, healthcare service providers, home care support service providers, direct care agencies, personal care services in residential settings, pediatric home care service providers. Those types of employers may be able to give you the full-time job offer that you need to go through this program.
All right, so let's look at some timelines. So the program opens March 31st of this year. Now, in previous programs, there were caps on the number of applications that would be accepted each year. And because of these caps, for example, programs like the Caring for Children pilot that was there before would have been filled within a few, almost, within the first hour of it opening. This year, there's a few things. We still think that the program will probably be filled quite fast. However, there's a few things that to consider. One is the government hasn't actually announced a cap on the program yet. Doesn't mean that they won't announce it later, but they haven't yet announced a cap. There's a quota that we can see in the immigration plan. It's around 10,000 this year. And that quota could be that if some people have been approved for permanent residence, 10,000 have been reached, they might leave the rest of the application to be processed the following year. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll stop taking in applications. So it's quite interesting as to how soon the program would be closed. Also, the fact that the applications are only right now for workers in Canada, not for workers overseas, would limit the number of people who can apply for this application as well. But when you are submitting the application, it is very important that you consider this. IRCC normally has the rule that you have to qualify upon submitting your application, upon application and throughout the application when your application is being assessed. That means that normally, if you don't submit the proper documentation at the beginning, that you would be disqualified. Now, that being said, in the past, sometimes if there are caps and there are emergencies, sometimes if you submit an application and say, hey, for example, my IELTS is coming, but I just don't have it right now, and then later on you submit your IELTS results afterwards, sometimes the officers do accept it. So irrespective of what it is, these applications will probably take quite a while to be assessed. How long is quite a while? I have no idea. Nobody really knows how long it could be. Last time the program was there, it was over 2 years before it was assessed. But sometimes the programs, especially if it's in Canada, and it's, it could be assessed maybe within a year. We don't know. But that being said, the applications must be perfected as much as possible when you do submit the application, because if it is not and it's returned, we don't know how long this program is going to be open for. We don't know whether or not they're going to introduce caps or quotas. So please don't take this lightly and just submit any kind of application. It must be perfected as much as possible. All right, so we're going to come and try to answer as many questions as we have. I see we already have 31 questions going on, so we have lots of questions here. What we do today is answer generally as many questions as we can, but it's very important for you guys to have a personal assessment of your situation if this is something that you want to apply for. If you email us, and our email is on here, inquiries@lmlawgroup.com, we can set up a consultation for you to meet with one of our lawyers at the firm and do a personal assessment for you. We do offer a discount for those people who come through our webinars. So if you do want to email us, let us know you came through the webinar, and the discounted rate is only $100, and we do it on video conference as well. So you don't even have to come to downtown Toronto to visit us. Okay. All right. Let's go through some questions here.
Okay, so we have a question about when is the international worker, when will the I imagine they mean the outside of Canada applicant stream open?
Good question. I don't know. I don't know if that anybody really knows about this. For now, we can't, it's not, we can't, we're not dealing with this for now.
Yeah.
How long is the approval process expected?
Yeah. So also, as you said earlier, we do expect that it may take a while. Previous streams have been quite long in terms of processing. However, as you mentioned, it's inside of Canada, so hopefully it won't be too long. But unfortunately, nobody knows right now. There's no posted processing time, or we aren't able to really estimate clearly how long it will take.
Right now, they haven't instituted a bridging work permit process per se while waiting for it, but I could certainly see that they might put that in. It would only make sense. All of the previous caregiver programs had a bridging work permit. What a bridging work permit is that if you submitted your permanent residence application, then you could apply for a open work permit while waiting for your application to be decided. They haven't put that into place at this time, but perhaps they might afterwards.
Mhm. This is the same one again. Yeah. So I have a cousin who is a teacher in a country named Haiti. How do I have to sponsor him to apply, or can he apply for himself?
So right now, they're not taking in applications for people outside of the country. They have said that they wanted to allow people who are currently working in Canada to apply. Now, if you're in Canada, you were working, you're on restoration of status, or you had to stop because of visitor status, etc., that may be taken into account. We're not sure yet. And even some people who are in Canada without status um, may be taken into account, but not for people right now who are outside of Canada. Can someone working as a social worker apply?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the requirements for this program require that you have 6 months of relevant work experience, which we assume is going to be in a home care environment. Being, working as a social worker, it's not technically really a caregiving role, but if you were doing the duties listed in the NOCs that they're using for this program when they do announce those, perhaps you could use that work experience. It really depends. Once they give a full list of the rules, we might be able to tell. And you also need a job offer as a caregiver. So you need to make sure you have the relevant experience and you have a job offer. So potentially if you do have that background and it's recent, then perhaps, but social worker is not one of the listed professions that's covered by this program, no.
I sometimes, as a social worker, if you do some of the duties that a home care worker does, for example, if you do the care, etc., you can point to that, and you may be able to, convince an officer that this is relevant work experience. It really depends on the particular situation, as is.
Okay, how can a private household give a full-term contract that accomplishes the program requirements? Is there need of a lawyer or immigration advisor to perfect the contract?
Certainly, the immigration rules will require certain elements to be on the contract, and we can certainly advise you on what needs to be in the contract. As immigration lawyers, though, we don't advise on employment law protections. So if that's something that you'd want to hire an employment lawyer to do, you could, but we do need to review the contract to make sure that it complies with all the requirements of this particular program on an immigration basis. So this again is wondering if the work experience has to be working full-time in any field or it just has to be caregiver only.
So for the job offer, it needs to be a full-time job offer for a home care position, providing care to an elderly person, child, or person with disabilities. Or if you're referring to the work experience, again, it needs to be relevant. So it has to be home care provision likely. Okay, do we need a police record check even if we live in Canada? What documents do we need for dependents?
So you need a police record check for countries that you have lived in for at least 6 months consecutively since the age of 18. If you are in, except for Canada, we don't usually submit the the RCMP reports for Canada unless they're requested. But for outside of Canada, if you know, haven't lived in Canada since the age of 18, then you may need to get your police checks for outside of the country. And documents you'll need for dependents, it really depends on the relationship, but normally we would need to prove the marital relationship or the common law relationship, and also the fact that you're the parents of the children as well. What does without status mean in practice?
Right. So in the context of this program, that might mean if you, for example, you used to have a work permit, or maybe you used to have a study permit, but it's now expired and you don't have a work permit at the moment, that can mean that you don't have status here in Canada.
So basically, without status would be someone who doesn't have temporary or permanent resident status. Of course, you don't care if you have permanent resident status, but temporary status means you have visitor status, you have work permit or study permit.
Can visitor visas apply?
So if you have visitor status in Canada, it doesn't, based on the website, seem to show that you can apply. However, we're not exactly sure how strictly they're going to enforce the rules. So for example, if you had a work permit and right now you have visitor status, would that be okay? We're not exactly sure if that's okay. If you, you know, had you have a work permit, but you stopped working for the employer, is that okay? We're not exactly sure. Sometimes you may just want to apply, put your application in, and see if it sticks. But for those people who have not yet worked at all in Canada, it's a little bit of a stretch, I would think.
I think they are accepting work experience from outside of Canada. So say
Are
for example,
accepting work experience, but for the workers in Canada,
yeah.
you have to, they specifically say that you should be working in Canada on a full-time basis. So if in this kind of situation, if you have a job offer, we could look at, yeah, even the LMIAs, if you don't have a work permit before, you wouldn't be able to do an LMIA. But if you had a work permit for something else, and we could look at doing an LMIA and having you work there, or you could become a student and you can start working and then have a work permit afterwards. And international students are great for this kind of situation because you have a work permit, even if you're working in another field, as long as you're working in Canada, we could apply for this program.
Okay. I am a refugee and I started working with TDSB February 11, 2025 as a DSW. Do I qualify for the pathway?
Um, it's an interesting question if you are a refugee claimant as to whether or not you would qualify. A lot of these kind of programs, they don't allow refugee claimants to do so. However, in this particular program, they have not stated yet that you are excluded. We are still getting drips and drabs of the policy information, and we're just able to tell you what we has been announced so far. So it would be interesting as to whether or not um, refugee claimants may be able to apply under this pathway.
Mhm.
Do you know if I think we already answered that question. When do we start applying?
So the program is supposed to open on March 31st, 2025. We don't know exactly what the mechanism of applying is. Is it going to be directly on the PR portal? Are we going to have to go through some other system or are they going to launch something new? We don't know yet what's going to happen, but do just keep an eye out for the updated rules as they come out. We hopefully will have those instructions before March 31st. Okay. What happens if I already have a profile in Express Entry with a different knock, but I've been working as a caregiver for the past 7 months and have a full-time job offer?
Yeah. Uh, your profile in Express Entry, you haven't submitted an application yet. Okay. And so certainly you want to make sure that you're um, when you submit an application, if you're invited to apply for Express Entry, that your work history is accurate, etc. But if you have the full-time job offer as a caregiver and etc., you could do both in parallel as long as you qualify for both in parallel.
Mhm.
Okay. Can somebody create the application on IRCC while waiting for the ECA and language testing? Basically, submit the application. They don't have the ECA yet. They don't have the language testing yet. Can they submit their application and then supplement it afterwards?
Right. So we will have to see exactly how they're accepting applications. Generally, it can be possible to do that sometimes. You can sometimes submit an application, but you do need to meet the requirements. And if you say you submit the rest of, say you get your ECA later and you get your IELTS done later and you just provide that as an update, It's risky because an officer, you're hoping that they look at it and that they accept it. You can do it perhaps, but it does have risks associated with it.
Yeah, if you again, right now they haven't announced caps. Are they going to announce caps later on this month or right before? They very well could be. If they do, then, waiting for language testing or ECA, you're kind of playing with whether or not the cap would be filled by the time you get your language testing and ECA. If there are no caps, then it certainly would be safer to submit it once you have all of this.
Okay. If an individual has a current work permit under an LMIA that is not expired, can the current employer rehire them under this pilot?
Yeah, absolutely. If you have an LMIA with a work permit, this is not something where you need to be rehired. This is a permanent residence application. So it's not something where you're going to get a work permit per se under this program. You may be able to apply for a bridging work permit afterwards. They haven't announced it yet, but in the meantime, you should keep yourself in status while waiting for the permanent residence to be issued. Are part-time work a factor in determining full-time employment? What happens if a student is working over their 24 hours? Can they use that?
So generally, based on the current program, you have to be working in Canada and to be able to apply. It's unclear whether, for example, unauthorized work experience would be allowed to count as the relevant work experience. Normally, you're going to try to base it off of authorized work experience. Once the program comes out, or if they announce a public policy for people who are without status, that may include those who have worked without authorization. Generally, though, it's a good idea to only work within your authorization if you're going to try to be using that later on. As for the 24-hour, like the part-time versus full-time question, we'll have to see if they accept cumulative work experience. So, for example, would 12 months of part-time work experience count as the equivalent of 6 months of full-time work experience? We'll see if they give us any clarification on those rules.
Okay.
Okay.
Uh,
I'm an open post-grad work permit holder. I'm employed full-time 10 months as an independent contractor and will only be given a T4A. Currently working with other patients too. Am I eligible to apply for PR?
so it doesn't necessarily say that you have to be employed. Right, Mary? I hadn't seen anything
Yeah, I think it's just
that
working,
work experience.
relevant work
So
experience.
far, so far, they haven't said that. So if you can prove, the matter is whether or not you can prove, if you can get letters from your patients, etc., then that might be okay. Yeah. Is IELTS acceptable as well for the language results?
Yep. So you can use, there's 3 language tests that IRCC accepts. They accept CELPIP, the PTE or the Pearson test for English, and the IELTS. So any of those 3 should qualify. Does the 6-month caregiver training from private institution also count? Does it apply to students who are from business education and work experience?
Yeah, it doesn't, you don't have to, spend your entire life and career doing caregiving. If you wanted to do a 6-month caregiving training, and again, anything under 6 months, 6 months minus a day, you can do without a study permit. And so certainly if you wanted to get that training and then apply for the program, yeah, absolutely, you can do that. Okay, somebody has a lot of uh,
Questions?
questions. Uh, okay, we can go through them maybe one
Sure.
after another. How long would the program be after it has been launched in March 31st?
Maybe they mean how long will it be open?
Yeah.
Perhaps this is referring to previous application programs that close almost instantly in the past when we have those caps on them. So we don't know how long it will be open. They haven't told us. We can assume that it will probably stay open until they meet their quota, and it may stay open after that. We don't exactly know.
What the fees are, those are published on the IRCC website. I think it's like the normal similar
PR application.
express
Yeah.
entry, right?
Yep.
And then processing time, again, we don't know. Process involving any interviews. Right now, normally they don't have the interviews, but that's not to say in the future they might. Family members outside of Canada, if you are inside Canada, we should be able to include the family members as well. Will be open to outside of Canada. Right now, it's not open, but in the future, they have created a category that's for people outside of Canada. So um, it doesn't make sense if they create a category and they don't allow. So in the future, hopefully that will be open. Okay, can a regular part-time caregiver apply for the Canada stream? I think we already talked about part-time work.
Mhm.
Is the employer responsible for the fees related to the application under the pilot?
So it's not, no regulation has been put out about who has to pay the fees. In the past, I think it could be the applicant. So there's no rule that we know of that says the employer must pay the fees for the application. High school diploma or higher bachelor, I guess they're wondering education requirements.
Yes, high school is what you need, um, but you have to prove it. Daycare included as well. I guess someone who's a daycare
Yeah.
provider, can they?
So not if it's not it has to be in somebody's house. That's the main way you want to think about it. So it's a residential or a home care provider. So if you're caring for children in somebody's private house, then yes, that could qualify. But if you're working at a daycare like a YMCA or something like that, then that's not under this program. That doesn't qualify.
But if you have work experience as a daycare caregiver, I think that's very relevant work experience.
That's true. Yeah. Well,
Take
yep.
care of someone's children. Yeah.
Mhm. What options are available to international graduates working in the healthcare sector for over a month whose postgrad work permits expire before the caregiver program opens?
Uh, come for a consult and we'll go over your options there. Uh, someone is saying, can they apply for their international student doing social work? Can they apply for the program even if they don't have a diploma yet? But I assume they would have a high school, and if they're doing
Yeah, secondary.
so yes.
Mm-hmm.
Can you apply for this program and also apply for the postgrad work permit? Yes, you could.
For
If
both.
yeah, if you qualify for postgrad, yes, you can.
Mm-hmm. Do you assist a certain employer to be able to issue an official job offer?
We would help the employer draft and make sure that they provide the proper documents. Um, they have to they have to be willing to provide the job offer to you, but whatever documents is required, we can certainly help out with that. Is there a limit on the number of applications accepted under this program? If they apply for PR through this program, do they need to remain employed as a caregiver or can they switch to a nursing related role once they qualify?
So for the number of applications, we don't know if they're going to be putting a cap where they'll say, okay, after a certain number of applications come in, we're closing it, we're not accepting new ones. We do know that there are quotas though for the number of caregivers that they can accept or they're planning on trying to accept in 2025. Uh, as for the question regarding switching, so generally the way that I look at it is you want to be in the qualifying for the program until your PR is granted, basically. Because an officer, when they're assessing your application, they could ask you for updated evidence of your work experience if they want to. And if you're not working in that role anymore, that could definitely create problems for your PR application.
It's about the genuineness of your job offer, right? So you're saying that you're going to be working in this role. Now, if you have the opportunity to work in this role and you're not working in this role, then the question could be how genuine is this job offer really for you? Um, that being said, if you have an open work permit, you could work in this role and on the side, you could do other work as well. That's okay. But I would say, in general, because we're looking at future intent, this job offer has to be there. That if you don't work in this job when you can work in this job, that calls into question as to whether or not you actually have that job offer.
Okay. Is there any age limit of candidates?
Not right now, they haven't said anything there. Are students working during their drop-off semester eligible? I don't
I'm not sure what drop-off semester is. For now, we don't know for students whether you have to have an actual work permit at the moment to be able to qualify. Hopefully, they'll provide more clarity on that in the coming weeks.
um I mean, it doesn't necessarily say that you have to have a work permit, but they do say that you should be working full-time, which could be an issue, I think, for students who are not in their last semester and can't be working full-time. Can you have,
Um,
oh, sorry, you go ahead. Yeah.
can we have a P&P application and also an open caregiver application at the same time?
Yes, it really depends on the PMP application as well. For example, if the PMP application, you say that you are going to be working in a high skilled position, and on the other hand, you have the caregiver program. Well, which one is it? Are you going to be doing both jobs, or yeah, it has to make sense. But in general, applying for one does not necessarily exclude you from applying for another. Personal support worker who works in a client home, are they qualified for this program?
Yep, if your job offer is to work to provide care in a private home, that could work. Yep. It depends on who's offering you the job. So if it's from, say, like a recruitment agency, then no. But if it's from a private individual, for example, then yes. Okay. If someone is working as a caregiver in a retirement residence, would they be eligible for this program?
So that's the problem. If it's in a retirement residence, if it is that you're working, there's some retirement residences that are just like apartments, right? And they have their own kitchen, they have everything, and it's a then I think in that situation it could be argued that you're working in their home. Now, if it's a nursing home where it's just a room and they come out and everybody it's not necessarily the same kind of situation whereas it's your own independent living, then that would be more in an institutionalized situation, and then that situation it would not be under this program that you would apply for. This person was working in a private house as a part-time job. Can they demonstrate the experience if their payment was in cash?
So it depends on the situation. You would likely want to have formal pay stubs in order to prove that you actually did the work experience. There are ways, like if you want, you can come talk to us about this so we can talk about exactly what evidence you might have to prove that you actually have that work experience. That would be one of the issues here.
A lot of times when someone is doing something very informally, and let's say you did it back home, and when you applied for your visitor visa, your work permit, study permit, you don't declare it in your forms. There could be issues later on when you say, well, I did this work because there was an issue of misrepresentation. Why did you not declare it back when you applied for your visa, right? Did you misrepresent then or are you misrepresenting now? So it really depends on your own circumstances. But when we're talking about these kind of situations where we're looking at relevant work experience, we need to prove it, and it also has should be consistent with the rest of what you declared as well. And if it's not consistent, then we can try to explain it, but it very well could be an issue when the officer evaluates your application. They work as a permanent staff in regional owned long-term care home as a housekeeping aide. Are they eligible for this pathway?
So to me, that sounds like it's within an institution, the long-term care home, and also being a housekeeping aide, you need to check if you'd even meet the requirements of the knock of a caregiver. But the institution would mean that you're not eligible under this program. It has to be in a private home.
Your work experience, though, I would say could be very relevant work experience. So if you are able to then find a job in a private home, you could probably qualify as long as you had that job offer in a private home.
And it would also need to be a full-time job offer. So you said you were part-time, but you want to make sure you have a full-time job offer.
Right.
Can the employer be a blood relative?
There's nothing right now that says that they can't. That being said, whenever it is a blood relative, especially if it's a close relative, they may scrutinize the application more closely. So we certainly have to be very careful to make sure that all of the elements are in place to make sure that this is a genuine job offer and we can show that it's a genuine employment situation. Will there be any requirements for the, let's say, elderly person's health condition? Does the elderly person need to be very sick?
They don't need to be very sick. They certainly you need to show that you're doing a job. So if you're providing full-time care for an elderly person, you would assume that they have some needs that they need help with, such as preparing meals, helping with their grooming, helping with medication. So presumably they're going to need assistance, and you will want to explain that in terms of your job duties. But there's no threshold of how sick or how much care they may need to have, but they do need to require care in order for your job to even make sense in that situation.
Yeah, it's not enough just for them to, qualify for the seniors discount at Shoppers or something like that, right? They have to actually need some help with their living.
Can I
Okay.
apply if I have a full-time job in home care settings and I don't have 6 months of of experience? I have my NACC PSW certificate.
I don't have 6 months work experience, but you do have at least 6 months of the training. Yes, if you have 6 months of training um, as a PSW, then yeah, you could qualify for that. This person is asking if they're on a visitor visa, can they apply for a work permit through this pathway?
So this pathway is not a work permit application, it's a PR application, and you do need to have a full-time job offer. So right now it's for workers in Canada. So we don't know exactly right now if there's going to be a way that it depends a lot on your personal situation. But this is not a work permit application. This is a PR application. If someone has a bachelor in experience as physiotherapist and taking care of people in general, can that count too?
Say it's arguable that that is relevant work experience, especially if you're taking care of someone who's disabled or elderly person. So very well could be. It just depends on your job offer as well. Again, a lot of these situations, it hasn't been well defined by the government. And so whenever that's the situation, um, it really is then the officer in the end who makes the decision. And you would want to make sure that, when we submit the application, we provide arguments as to how it is that you have relevant work. How's the work experience that you have relevant to the situation? It's if someone is on a visitor record, they want to train to be a PSW, can they then get a work permit to complete the PSW practical portion?
Okay, so as Elizabeth mentioned earlier, you can study without a study permit if you do a course that's less than 6 months long. But if you're going to be studying in a course that's more than 6 months, you do need to apply for a study permit. And when you apply for a study permit, if the course also has a co-op component or a work placement program, you can apply for what's called a co-op work permit to complete that portion of the program.
Right now, though, for the PSW where you can get a study permit, you do need to be going to a public college in order to get the PALS for the most part, in order to get the study permit. If someone oh, sorry, your
I'll
turn.
ask you.
Yeah.
And a person who's waiting for postgrad work permit who has a personal support worker certificate, more than 6 months of work experience apply for this program.
Yes, if you have the job offer, this is a perfect situation. If you have that work permit, you're working, you
I think
have
they're just waiting for the
have
post.
the PSW certificate, it seems like it's ideal for someone such as you to, as long as you have the job offer.
Okay. I think we answered the refugee one before. We don't know yet.
Mhm. If they work with an agency that gives me a letter, them a letter, do they qualify if they have CLB 10, so their English is fine, and work experience as in a care sector?
So they have specified pretty clearly that this program is not for people who have job offers from placement agencies. So it depends on the type of agency. If it's a healthcare or home care providing organization, then perhaps. But if it's a placement agency, then no, it wouldn't qualify as an employer for this program. Do we need a police clearance before we submit the application, or can we raise a web form after submitting the application? They have IELTS West full-time job offer and 6 months of experience.
Police certificates, a lot of times for permanent residents, we tell them that we will submit the police clearance certificates after we receive the AORs. It's because the police certificates do expire um, after, after a year or so. So if you don't have the police certificates, I would just still submit the application. Okay. Uh, is there an income requirement for employer?
So there's no specific income minimum, but they do need to show, like, it has to be a reasonable, genuine job offer. So the person does need to be able to afford to pay you a reasonable salary for working as a caregiver.
We're just basing it off of previous caregiver programs where the employer did need to show that they have enough money to not only support themselves and their families, but also to pay your income as well. Someone, oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Can someone trained in early childhood care benefit from this program?
Yeah, I think that's very relevant training,
Mhm.
especially if you're going to take care of children. If you're going to take care of elderly, I don't know if that would necessarily be relevant. So someone has a caregiver hired on LMIA. Closed work permit will end in 2026. Is there any merit in applying through the pilot to expedite the PR status for her?
I would say absolutely. This would be like an ideal program given that they have a work permit, they've got the work experience. That seems like the perfect applicant for this program. So certainly they should apply. Can a field refugee apply? We just don't know about refugee claimants yet.
Yeah.
Um, Whenever international candidate stream opens, if the candidate has dependents back home, what will be their status? Can they come with the main applicant?
We don't know what that program will look like. Um, whether or not they can actually come while waiting for their permanent residence, whether they will be given a temporary work permit or they have to wait until the permanent residence is issued. When that program opens, then we'll certainly, we probably have another webinar to talk about that. Okay, so someone has personal support workers who take care of people in their homes alone and employed by an institution. They drive within the community to provide this care. If this is a situation, can they qualify for the program?
So it's a little unclear here. They're taking care of people in their homes, but are employed by an institution. Maybe this person means an organization. So they can be employed by an organization that is sending them to someone's home to care for them. That can qualify. It just can't be a placement or a recruitment agency. So if it's an organization that's providing that home care, that's fine. And that sounds like maybe that's what's happening here. So this could potentially qualify.
What's the difference between a placement agency and a institution that provides home care?
Maybe you'd be better placed to answer that.
I think normally a recruitment agency is someone who basically says, okay, well, you know what, you want a job, I'm going to match you with an employer and you can go and work for the employer. when you talk about a an institution that provides home care, in this situation, for example, um, the the homes they contact the the institution and they say, look, I need caregivers to work in my home. Can you provide these caregivers? And so the institution they do the scheduling, they oversee your care, they oversee your work, they give you the pay stubs, etc. They're in charge of doing the home care. Whereas it's when you're looking at a placement agency or when you're looking at the recruitment agency, they're really just doing the match. Hey, you want someone? Okay, here you go. And it's not necessarily that they're actually in charge of providing the actual care. I don't know if that makes any sense.
I follow that. Yeah. So, how many hours make full-time work? Is it 30 hours per week?
30 hours a week, you got it. Uh, I work helping my relative who was disabled until they recovered. Is this in-home work? Would this help me be eligible?
Potentially, it depends on what kind of proof you might have of the time and what exactly was going on, where it was located, whether it was full time, that kind of thing. But you may be able to use this as relevant work experience. It would depend on the specific situation. How much do you charge for this whole process?
It really depends on your situation. Come for a consult. We'll see if you qualify. We'll see if you are able to what we need to do for you, and then we can quote you a fee when you do that. Like I said, the consultation fee is $100 if you tell us that you came to this webinar. If someone it's an international graduate, they're currently out of status in Canada. Can they, if they have a valid job offer, can they apply for this pilot program?
Okay, so I just want to clarify here. First of all, we're not sure about the out of status applicants yet. We're waiting for the public policy to be announced there. Secondly, having a valid job offer in the healthcare sector. It's not just the healthcare sector, it has to be in a home care setting. So you also just want to make sure it meets that requirement and keep an eye out for the public policy whenever it comes out. Can I apply with my spouse? We're both here in Canada.
Yeah, just one person needs to be the principal applicant, and then your company dependents would be added to the application. Um, this person has a lot of personal questions. Please do, if you have personal questions about your situation, come for a consult. We'll go over your situation. Can a person who has a minimum of 8 months as a recreation coordinator in a retirement home apply if they have a home-based employer offering job offer?
It's a good question. It really depends on what you were doing. Recreation coordinator to me doesn't sound quite like doing the actual caregiving. So looking after the people's needs, that kind of thing. We may get more clarification from the government about what is relevant work experience, and you would want to compare this work experience if they do provide that clarification to that. Maybe you can make an argument. It really depends on how involved you were with the care.
And, in the end, if they don't have the parameters set out, then it's just a matter of arguing. It's a matter of saying, well, look, this is what it is. And also, I think a lot of times when they're asking for relevant work experience, it's to show that you can actually do the job, that you would be able to do the job, that you can do the job. Oftentimes, if you're able to work for the employer and you do work for the employer after 6 months, we can update it and say, hey, look, by the way, this person has now been working with the employer for 6 months. And that's even more of an argument as well.
I think we just answered this one before.
Mhm.
Can a person with a Canadian education and social service worker gerontology qualify?
Maybe, perhaps, all these kind of specific situations, like I said, it's arguable. If it's arguable and no parameters have been set which disqualify it, then that's something that could be done. It just depends on how well you prove it. Um, If they did a childcare, they had childcare experience, would job offer with elderly care still be eligible?
So childcare,
So their work experience is childcare.
yeah, potentially. Again, it's the same thing. We don't have a lot of clarification on what the exact rules are going to be there. If it's open-ended, then I think you could say you have relevant experience under the program and you're going to be doing something else. It would depend a little bit on exactly what the experience looked like.
Okay, we're
Um,
gonna go through. I'm gonna skip a lot of these
sure.
work experience because okay. So does the private household can they provide a payroll for payment and tax purposes?
If you mean like formal pay stubs for the work, then absolutely they can provide that. And I think it's very useful for the application. Um, if I apply to this program while it's in process by your office, can I still apply for a student visa if I want to pursue a master's degree as well for 16 months? Can it be processed my pathway program and my study permit too? Can it be done at the same time?
Here's the thing. If you wanted to apply for this program, you have to show the genuineness of your intent to work in this job offer. Now, if you were to study and you were to still work in this job, I think that's okay. But if you were to study and then you just say, "Well, I'm studying, I'm not going to work in this position," then by the time the officer gets to your application and they see that you're not working in this position, they could very well say that your job offer is not genuine. Okay. Let's see here. Does one need to have an express entry profile before applying?
No, you don't need an express entry profile to apply. It's you can just apply directly for this program. It's not linked to express entry. Um, let's see here. Okay, lots of work experience questions. Lots of these are repeating what we've discussed already. If I have a Canadian college certificate, should I still submit a high school diploma?
If you already have something higher than high school, then no, you don't need to submit the high school. It's just as at least a high school. Uh, let's see here. They they're on a work permit application, yeah, work permit right now, but they're working not in home care. But they do have work experience outside of Canada, and they also complete a caregiver program outside of Canada. Can they use that experience and apply for this program?
They could potentially use that experience if it's relevant, recent, and if the caregiver program was also relevant to the job that they'll be doing here in Canada. Potentially, yes.
Okay.
My computer is about to die, so maybe we should just do
Okay, let's
one
just do one
more.
last question.
Okay, let's see here. I'm just looking for a question that's different from the ones that we've answered so far.
If, okay. Is there any oh, we already talked about this. Sorry, a lot of your questions are
Will be answered in the recording too.
will be on there. Um, how about this? Does working with a placement agency count as work experience?
Good question. I think if you're doing caregiving like work through that placement agency work, then I don't see why it shouldn't be considered relevant to the job that you would have.
Awesome. Well, that's all the questions that we can answer today. I'm sure you guys have more questions about your own personal circumstances. Happy to have consultations with you and work with you on that. Guys, these kind of programs right now, it's it's a difficult kind of situation because the government themselves, it doesn't seem to be very clear on a lot of situations. Now, in these kind of circumstances, after you submit the applications, oftentimes it does require some finesse from us to make sure that we can show that your applications fit within the rules, not only within the rules, but the intent of the program as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. All the best with your applications, and we're happy to help you along the way. Take care, everyone.
Bye.